Shelley, your thoughts on TikTok pulling out of Hong Kong and perhaps some of the real underlying reasons of why they're doing that?
Yeah, definitely. I think this was actually quite an astute political move on TikTok's part. Unlike some of their competitors like Facebook and others, they kind of saw the political winds shifting in Hong Kong and in China and realized that they could actually come out ahead and kind of appease some of the U.S. officials and others who have accused TikTok of kind of handing over data to the Chinese government. This way, they can pull out. They can say, no, we're not going to agree to give any data to the Chinese government, while looking good in the U.S., but also looking good to Beijing, which is happy to see another social media platform that protesters and other anti-government folks have used in Hong Kong to organize.
Well, exactly. I mean, doesn't this just help the Chinese, given that the app, as you mentioned, was for really pro-democracy protesters? A lot of the ways in which they communicated, does this not just fall right back into the lap of the Communist Party?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, TikTok was not super popular in Hong Kong among the protesters just because a lot of the young protesters already kind of were nervous about the Chinese ownership and didn't post a lot on TikTok. But it was one area where both people in Hong Kong and around the world would post things about China and that China didn't have control over. Now, TikTok isn't that big in Hong Kong, and so they're not going to lose out on a lot of money. And at some point, they could allow people in Hong Kong to use the Chinese version of the app, which is called Douyin.
What does this mean for TikTok from the business perspective in Hong Kong? And then what does this also now mean for Hong Kong as they lose another social media app?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people will. I've already spoken to people in Hong Kong who are kind of bummed about it, but it's more about the need to now start to think, what's going to be next. Because Facebook and Google and WhatsApp, things that are really used to do everyday business in Hong Kong by banks and other companies, there's kind of no way they're going to be able to continue going along if they're going to be asked for data requests from the Chinese government. They're going to have to find a solution. And so the thing that a lot of people are afraid of is this the first app that's coming in Hong Kong? And what is that going to do to the business and the economy of Hong Kong if you can no longer use other apps like WhatsApp or Google?
Shelley, we bring this story back here to the U.S., and you have a lot of U.S. legislators and officials looking at perhaps banning TikTok because the parent companies you alluded to, ByteDance, we're not quite sure what they do with the data if they do hand it over to Chinese officials. What are you hearing about ramped up pressure to now block TikTok here in the U.S.?
Yeah, so for a while we were hearing a lot from senators. Senator Rubio, Chuck Schumer has called for an investigation. But for the first time, really, we saw Donald Trump today come out and say, we're going to look at banning TikTok in the U.S. And so this is important, not because he might not necessarily follow through with these threats, but just because it kind of the way he characterized it was, we were looking for ways to shoot back at China, and TikTok could be one of those areas of collateral damage. And TikTok has spent the large part of the last 2 years trying to convince America that it's an American company, especially with the hiring of a new CEO last month in Kevin Mayer, who came from Disney. And so TikTok made the rounds today and said, we are an American company. We have an American CEO. We employ hundreds of thousand people in the U.S., and we should be treated like an American company. And so you're going to see that battle play out, I think, especially in the months leading up to the election.